Hey friends, it's Melissa here. No, this is not lingerie. It's a bathing suit, but it's got chains, crisscrossing chains. And it represents for us the muscle chains that we're going to talk about today. And so I'm going to get to that in maybe like 5 minutes because I want anyone who is joining me who shows up to Facebook to be able to join in this discussion, maybe even throw out your comments, have your questions answered. So if you join in later, then you can fast forward to about the 5-minute mark where we really get in to the content of this discussion. Let's talk about muscle chains. How do they make our movements into patterns, specific patterns of movement? How does that impact how our bodies potentially feel? Because a pattern of movement that works together might set up certain muscle groups to get stronger, potentially tighter, and might make a disadvantage for other muscle groups, particularly the deep stabilizing muscles. So those of you who are thinking about how you may have or might be worried about having back pain, shoulder pain, hip pain, knee pain, there are going to be some insights from this conversation that just might help you think about how are you moving. This is very, very important. Yes, we can do anything in our workouts. Yes, we can tone and fit, make our bodies toned and fit. But do those bodies show up and do work for you? Are those strong bodies protecting you to move and prevent yourself from being injured? Not necessarily. I really feel my role as a physiotherapist is to guide you guys to learn what you can do in basic movements. Basic movements are my specialty. So while we give people 3 or 4 minutes to show up and hopefully participate in this discussion, let's talk about physiotherapy. Maybe some of you have had physiotherapy, and you can think about physiotherapists as healthcare professionals who guide. So we are healthcare professionals. We're the ones in the hospitals getting people up for the first time, teaching them how to walk again after stroke, spinal cord injury, shoulder surgery, knee surgery, major illness. We are the trusted healthcare professionals because we go through a professional program to really understand how the body moves. How do we set up bodies to move safely? We're the safety experts as well. So we're the healthcare professionals and we guide. Maybe you haven't had physio in a hospital, but maybe you've had guidance in a clinic. Maybe you've had guidance on a sports team. Our role is to teach you how to learn how best to move, how to move most efficiently, because efficient movement is safe movement. And it's not about what you do. It's about how you do it. A lot of people think that they need more challenging movements when really what they need to do is call on the deep stabilizing muscles to show up and perform the movement. So, without further ado, let's get into this. The patterns of movement. So, muscles are encased in connective tissue that we're going to call myofascium. And this myofascium connects multiple groups of muscles. So you can think about these crisscross chains connecting different segments. And sometimes they even are in a crisscross pattern so that we have one side of the body working with the other side of the body. And these chains of movement have been the ones I'm going to talk about here, there's a lot of them listed, chains, but only some of them have been confirmed to be connected to each other in our anatomy. Okay, so I'm only going to talk about the ones at the highest level of research that have been verified to be connected. And even so, with these connections, there isn't always a major exchange of force, but the connective tissue here, this intermediate space that connects one side to the other, it's got a whole system, nerves, contracting tissues, sensors that sense stretch movement, nerve endings. So this is lively tissue, and it has the potential to bring patterns of movement together. So I always take an understanding of movement, and as a guide, I simplify these patterns into a story, a movement that you have done before, that you understand. Oh, okay, I can see how that would work. That's really what makes me special, is I'm the only physio that I know that takes mass amounts of information and bundles them into stories, beach stories, to try and present them to you in a simple way. So I'm going to present to you the whole story. And if you feel like this is a great story that I want to come back to with little bits, there's one major insight that really stood out to me there and I want to come back to it, I'll stick the link to my education group where you can grab the tidbits, the insights, come back to them, think about them as you're moving, and help yourself learn and move forward with your goals. Okay, so I'll stick the link to my education group after this video airs. So imagine this, okay? Of course we're at the beach, right? We're at the beach, and it's just a really relaxed day. The water's calm, and we're just gonna float. We're gonna float and figure out how we're gonna stay floating in the water. We're gonna float using our bodies, and then we're gonna get into a boat here. You see my lovely boat? We're gonna get into the boat and we're gonna float there. So let's figure out, how exactly are we going to get into that boat? Well, there's two ways that I think about when I'm floating. There's the big arm movement float, where you're like this, bringing your arms up and down. Okay, so this is a chain. It's a chain of movements, go this way, that holds you in the thumbs up position. So usually when you're floating, I don't feel like you have your hands down. That feels a little unnatural and is hard to do in the water. So if you were floating and using your arms to move you, you'd go into the palm up position and you'd do this. And you'd probably get a little bit of elbow bending sometimes, and sometimes you wouldn't. That's a whole chain. There's a whole chain of muscles that help you do that kind of float, okay? Float number one, the lateral chain. Lots of support for those movements working together in this position. But in real life, unfortunately, the way our muscles have been set up to move when we're on the ground is not exactly like this. There's one small difference, and that is we would function a lot better if our arms, as they came up, moved into more of a palm up position, but they don't. They stay in a kind of a neutral position, and that's okay. That's all right, except for the fact that when us humans got off hands and knees and got using our arms in the air as hunters, as gatherers, picking berries, it turns out there's a lot of muscle chains that help the arm turn inward, but not a very good connection to the muscle chains that turn the arm outward. There's only one small connection to the muscle called the infraspinatus that turns your arm outward. So overall, we've got a lot of raising arm patterns that turn the muscle, that turn the shoulder inward. And that's actually a position that can aggravate a bunch of shoulder conditions that people have when their arms are up. Doing painting, doing the modern day hunter-gatherer type movements where the arm's up for a long period of time or moving quickly. So unfortunately, our anatomy hasn't connected very well to the outward rotating muscles that we need to hold our shoulder in a good position. Case number one. We're good at holding our arm in the thumbs up position, but we don't actually have a lot of strength in this upward position to keep the actual shoulder held back, okay? There's our first problem that I see. Second way of floating, say you get a little tired of doing the big movements and you just want to like relax a little bit. I call this the sculling, where you're just kind of going like this. Classic movement position, that. This movement position, position B. This is called the dorsal chain. Dorsal, the back part of our arm, does this. Okay, seems pretty functional, I guess, maybe. Maybe the row position, right? Arm comes back, turns in, everything extends. So, we've got ourselves another chain here, the sculling, the floating number 2. Still, we've got that internal turning. Unfortunately, we're gonna have a stronger turning inward of the position of our day-to-day life that makes it sore, right? So, didn't win the shoulder lottery with that chain either, did we? Okay, moving on. We see our tube. So how are we gonna get in there anyway? Like, we got this big tube, because I think you guys don't remember what it's like to be babies on hands and knees and how hard it was to get that control to go into standing. Like when I'm working with people who are learning to walk again for the first time, brain injury survivors, stroke survivors, they do know what it's like, how hard it can be to get from this position to this position. But we take for granted how it's quite easy for us to extend the hips, right? Some of the seniors that I work with get it. They know it's hard to stand up without using our hands. A lot of seniors that I work with have to push like this. Call that Gower sign. Can't get enough bum strength to get that lift. They need their hand pressure. But a lot of you don't remember what that's like to have to work so hard to get into standing. But I bet you know how hard it is to get into a boat from the water. So you gotta, like, first of all, generate that swim, right? Swim like mad. Get yourself into that boat. Turn on the glutes. Swimming muscles, oh my gosh. And maybe, just maybe, you'll generate enough lift to get your butt out of the water and into that boat. There's a weak link to the outer hip muscle too. The glute max muscle is a huge muscle and it wraps from the bum around the outer leg. So there's a weak connection between the glutes on the deep, they call this the functional back line. And I think functional is a really great word because the glutes are one of the easiest muscles to turn off when we have issues like back pain or back problems. Usually we'll find there's a weakness of the glutes, and some other muscle that I'm getting to later is going to take over the job for us. So weak glutes, you're going to have trouble even getting out of the water in the first place, right? And this is what it looks like on land. Trouble rising into this plank position, okay? And there's a weak link to the outer hip muscle, which for me, working with a lot of seniors in the community, I do see that problem on land. Looks like this. See how my leg is not staying straight? It's bowing inward. They call this Trendelenburg sign. And guess what? It's not just for seniors, it's for runners too. We got a lot of runners who don't have a straight leg during the stride phase of their walking. And because of that, they end up with tightness on their outer hip and something called IT band syndrome. They don't have the strong glute. So it's the same kind of problem that people who are trying to challenge themselves this way have. Don't have strong glutes, don't have a strong outer hip muscle, and are standing like this when they challenge themselves and are running into all kinds of problems. Because all that wiggle waggle at the hip when you're walking without control is going to get transferred into your back. That's a lot of load for the back to carry as well. So we can see why we have day-to-day problems with function, with our sports, with our recreation, with our comfort. Back pain, hip pain. Imagine what that looks like in the knee when you can't carry your force through your main core. Okay, so we didn't win the lottery there either. Really could have used a little more of a connection to that outer hip to work for us. And this deep muscle, the glutes, is difficult to turn on. You know what turns on a little easier is the hamstring. And I think that we notice that as well when we're swimming. We're not going to swim like this with the legs straight, are we? At some point we're going to bend our knees and let our knees do the work, because we can get more of a push that way. There we go, having our hamstrings take over the job of the glutes. A classic problem that we see in back pain, where when someone goes to rise from their chair, they're not using their glutes, they're using their hamstrings. They're extending with their back to get up. Instead of driving down through the foot, they're extending through their back. Ow, that is painful. And we see a lot of hamstring dominant standers who stand with a tuck and have this flexed back all the time with disc issues, tight hamstrings, really strong hamstrings, not enough glutes, not enough strength in the glutes, not that balance. So here we see what we call the superficial back line, not the functional back line that uses glutes, the superficial back line, the line that shows up and takes over the job for those back stabilizers. And you know what? In this superficial back line, you've got a direct connection through the sacrotuberous ligament from the hamstrings to all the back extenders, which means the hamstring has a very easy way of moving the back with the big movers and not the deep movers. You know what doesn't have a very good connection in the back? The deep stabilizers. What? The multifidi, the ones we need segment by segment to segment to actually stabilize our back as it's moving. Didn't win the lottery there. anecdotally, in older folks, there actually is a connection through the whole lower leg. When you think about walking, the hamstring starts working like here, starting to bend the knee and pre-swing. Okay, so you've got the calf starting to work and the hamstring starting to initially generate that force, right? So for the second part of walking, as you're getting the force, you're getting that hamstring to finish the back extension and start the swing. We don't turn on our glutes very well when we're walking. In order to get our glutes actually working, we have to be kind of on land, working on slopes, like going upstairs. The glutes don't turn on very well, relatively speaking, in walking. You get them to fire a lot better when you have to be moving yourself up rather than forward in space. So if you have to move your bum up this way, or standing where you've got to stand on a step, or like doing a lunge or a squat where you're bringing your body up, that's going to fire the glutes. Especially when you think about driving through the heel. So that means when you're doing your lunges, you got to be getting your weight forward onto the front leg so you can be driving through that heel. And when you're doing your squats, you're thinking about putting your weight evenly on your feet, but imagine that connection to the ground through your heels so that you are thinking about using the legs to get you there. The most functional way that people get down to the floor is not the squat, it's the lunge. The lunge is our way to get down to ground level. Squats are designed to help us sit down from chairs, toilets, whatever. But the most functional way, an efficient way to get down to the ground is the lunge. So how we do the lunge is more important than doing the lunge at all. If you don't know what you're thinking about when you're lunging, are you turning on the glutes or are you using the bigger mover muscles? If you don't think about it, you probably are not taking the opportunity to turn on the muscles you actually need. Unless you're focusing on it, it's doubtful that you're getting as much muscle activity as you really could. They study people even just thinking about movement who aren't moving, and you can turn on the muscle segments in your mind. So really, there's a huge potential in focusing your attention on where you want those muscles to show up and do the work. If you're not thinking about your glutes, are you even turning them on? If you aren't thinking about your glutes when you stand up, are you even turning them on? So the extensors of the knee, I say they connect really well to the outside of the leg, right? But if you're the kind of person who's suffering from knee pain, there's a lot more folks out there who suffer from inner knee pain, loading at the inner knee, and they've got issues with too much force on the inner knee, and they've got relatively more strength here. Makes sense, right? We know the muscle chain connects strongly through the glute to here. We could certainly use a little bit more glute to stay strong, but we could definitely use way more inner quad to stay aligned from the hip down through the knee. So that's why when I'm doing lunges and even squats, I'm thinking about having the inner part of the knee active and moving, because we didn't win the lottery when it came to having inner quad strength. Who knows? Maybe our bodies were designed to be on hands and knees and we just haven't evolved to the point where we actually have the right muscle balance to be upright, right? It's a totally different movement pattern when you're upright. If you take the arm and bend and straighten when it's pressing against something, it's gonna rotate in completely the opposite direction as when you put it up in space. So it's like our bodies had one way of moving on hands and knees, and then we decided to just change it up and get up on our feet. And now our hands have to learn the backwards way of moving, because most of the time we aren't on our hands and knees. We're up in the air, right? Maybe that's not a problem for you. Maybe you don't use your arm up in the air much, but maybe occasionally you do. Like maybe occasionally you get under your car with a wrench and a hammer or something. Maybe you chop wood. Maybe all of a sudden one weekend you got to do a whole bunch of stuff with your arm up, and our bodies just haven't been prepared for that. So it's not at all surprising that you get an injury when you go and do those movements. The shoulder joint is not a very stable joint. It's not deep in its socket. It's very easy for it to move around into a not so great position and squish some stuff that's not very happy with it. So if you continue to have your arm up without control, without focus, and it's just kind of sitting anywhere and pinching stuff, and you keep doing it, naturally stuff is gonna kind of fray over time. That's not at all surprising either. Or if you sit for a long period of time with your shoulders forward, it's not at all surprising that you're weak back there. It's not at all surprising that you're tight over here, right? Our bodies get good at what they're used to doing. Let's move on. We're not in that boat yet, are we? We've kicked like crazy. We've tried this. We've tried this. Oh, we got a leg up. Okay, now we're getting somewhere. We got a leg up, and we're using our rotating muscles. Oh, right? Because what do you do here? You've brought the knee up to the chest. We're now using the spiral muscles in our bodies. And these are really cool chains. The spiral line connects your shoulder stabilizers, which is nice, to the twisty abdominal muscles, the obliques. And the cool thing is it connects the external oblique on one side to the internal oblique on the other side. So you really can't imagine the crisscross that I have happening on my bathing suit. That's really cool, right? So we can get this crisscross movement. Awesome, because it turns out we do these rotations a lot. We do need rotational control. But you know what it didn't give us? All those awesome spiral connections didn't connect so great to the deep band of muscles that get real close to the spine. The transversus abdominis. We missed that one. These are all superficial muscles on the outer aspect. And so maybe that's why I see people with six packs getting back injuries. If we aren't thinking about getting the deep muscles working, are they showing up? Are those deep back muscles, stomach muscles, providing the compression at our spine to hold its stability as we're moving? Hard to say. Didn't win the lottery there. So that's how these spiral muscles would get the leg up. Okay, so we're getting somewhere. Now we've got two legs up. Now we gotta pull the rest of our body up. And there you can really imagine the pull. Here we've got a ventral line on the front of our arm that pulls our food to our mouth, that pulls us up into the boat finally. And we've got the tummy muscles here that work to do that pull. It's that inward pull, and you've got your six-pack muscle, the rectus abdominis. Great, you've got the squeeze inward. But it missed the transversus abdominis, it missed the deep muscles. So it's not at all surprising why, when people have pain, or even before they have pain, they may have a lot of trouble turning on that really deep muscle called the transversus abdominis, because it just isn't super well connected. So you've pulled yourself into the boat and you've got there. But now you can see why our bodies sometimes are designed to use the superficial muscles called the prime movers. And sometimes those superficial muscles called the prime movers will get the job done. But sometimes those superficial muscles called the prime movers may actually get our movements happening in a way that hurts us. If we didn't call on the other important stabilizing muscles that we didn't win the lottery and we don't have good connections to, if we didn't think about how we moved to call on those deep stabilizing muscles, we might be just moving for movement's sake, and we might be setting ourselves up for an injury with movement. The 2 times I see a lot of movement injuries are, well, there's many, but 2 big ones we can think about are sustained work, so moving things around with your back for a while, not taking breaks, going into this bend position. That's hard on your back without the stabilizing muscles for sure. And sustained positions, sitting with the shoulders forward, and quick movements, right? You think about twist in the back, sure, but you think about the fast movements for the arm, the throwing, the chopping wood, whatever it may be. Really difficult to do in an untrained body. So, what is your greatest takeaway? Adam, join the ranks. Posture's hard. And a lot of us, the problem with posture, in my opinion, is that it requires your attention initially. And if it's taking your attention away from the job you're doing, it's hard to multitask, right? And when we're not paying attention to our posture and we haven't practiced, then we'll fall into an old pattern of movement. And there's 3 stages of learning for anything. First, you have to think about it, really think about it in a quiet environment. See, I mean, you're further ahead of it just knowing that driving is a trigger for you. That's you're way further ahead of the game just even knowing that, because if you know that's when you're most likely to not be paying attention, then you could put some subtle things in, like even just a little roll here. What it does is it gives you extra feedback, like just having feedback, something touching your back that's like, oh, lean over that. It takes the work out of remembering because you've got this little reminder back here, right? Like this little roll, and it's like, oh, okay, just sit on that. Or a visual reminder, like a little sticky note or something. Like little reminders, we need those because we're not going to be able to multitask. We're not made to multitask in the beginning. It's like learning a dance. You can't learn the dance and then just go and do it. You have to practice small movement, then practice putting some movements together, and you have to practice it over and over and over again before it becomes unconscious. So when you're first learning, you need lots of little reminders in order to get the movement that you want. Otherwise, it's going to be hard to remember that practice while still trying to remember to drive, right? So habits, to form a good habit, you need lots of triggers. Like people can even train themselves to, every time they see a smiley face sticker, they're like, oh yeah, I would be happy to stretch. And they put smiley face stickers all over their house, like whatever it may be. That little reminder that's like, oh yeah, okay. And the more you remember, the more you do. The more you do, the more unconscious it becomes. And the more unconscious it becomes, the more likely you're going to do it when you're multitasking. Yeah. Glutes are an issue for sure. Glutes are an issue because the superficial muscles, the hamstrings, are gonna put your pelvis in a different position, and then you basically are sitting with a flexed spine all the time. And we know how hard it is for the backs, particularly backs who've had disc issues, to handle flexion all the time. That load is tough. The second mistake I see people make is first thing in the morning, they feel like, I'm stiff. I want to bring my knees to my chest. Not with a disc issue. It might feel good at the moment, but you're just getting the stretch reflex. Stretch reflex feels good, but your discs have a lot of pressure in them first thing in the morning, and it's kind of the worst thing you can do. So with people who are recovering from a disc issue, I say, really think about what bending movements you absolutely need. Like, you absolutely need to bend to put on your pants, tie your shoes. But if you don't absolutely need to bend, if you can avoid the long sitting in the morning, you absolutely need to sit to drive. But then really think about, especially first thing in the morning when the disc pressure is high, do you need to bend? Because sometimes movements that feel good really aren't setting up balance, right? Our bodies function the best when they have balance. And that's why I feel it's very important that I go back to basics with people and say, what are you going to do with this information? If we know that there are certain muscle groups in our shoulder that don't turn on very well, in our core that don't turn on very well, in our hips that don't turn on very well, in our knees, it's not a lot of focus. There's one position for the shoulder, there's one position for the back, there's one position for the knee. So you just have to practice turning those muscles on, because if you don't practice it a lot, it's not going to happen. That's why when I'm teaching people how to get comfortable, simply comfortable with movement, with pain, with injury, or when they aren't really experienced in knowing what their body needs, I start with the basics, those basic 7 movements of everyday life that we do, and we think about how do we do those movements with alignment, with posture, with the right muscle groups working. How do we make sure we're paying attention to the stabilizing muscles showing up to do that work, so that they get really good at showing up for us in our day-to-day life. There's lots of people who work on high-level, advanced movements that have a lot of motion, but that's not me. I am teaching people how to move in sitting, how to move in standing, and how to do simple movements on the floor if they need, or do any of the following. That's why I made a chair program for people who can't get out of their chairs well, so they can get started with the right 7 basic movements and start getting better at efficient movement. And there's a standing one for people who don't feel confident in how they're standing and moving, to get that balance, alignment, form, function. And for folks who want to challenge themselves on the floor and are ready for that, basic stuff, really basic stuff. Because I know I can really only do a good job at one thing. So that's my thing. I am your guide. I'm your guide. If you're not sure whether or not those stabilizing muscles are even working, and you're not sure if the movements you're doing are using the most efficient and safe way of doing the movement, if you're not sure, it's worth giving your attention to, because after 6 weeks of practicing the movement properly with the right form, you'll be able to know how to turn on those muscles. You'll know what it feels like when they're working. You'll know what it feels like when they're not. And you'll be able to play with more challenges. But everybody's got to start somewhere. Everybody's got to start somewhere, right? So if this is new information for you and you're feeling like this is good stuff to think about, I'll post the link to my group so that you can think about this stuff. But if you think, you know what, I just need a little bit of guidance to get the right muscles firing, then reach out to me, because I've got video guidance in a number of ways. Got a number of options for like $7 a month that are going to help guide you to get these right muscles working, get your just right challenge, and just practice those 7 basic everyday movements. My program is like 20 minutes. It does upper and lower body, which means that if you were doing maybe you could do both your arm and leg workout in the same day if you wanted to, or if you wanted to split it up, you're going to practice those functional movements with 10 minutes a day. And then they're all in closed chains. So they're all with your arms or legs down. So we get muscle group contraction all throughout the joint, stabilizing, protecting the joint. So with a 20-minute program, that leaves 10 extra minutes for you to do those things that are really special for you, that you love, like the extra stretches that really give you comfort. Or in my case, I do karate, and there's not a lot of things in the hands and knees position that are like karate. I need to have control of my leg in space, so I spend those extra 10 minutes working on leg control in space. If you're a painter or you use your arm up in space, you should add, if you can, a few of my exercises that help give you shoulder control up in space. You do need to have all those muscle groups working and strong, but then you can practice the specific things that'll put you at risk. The quick movements, or like I do with the karate kicks, or like caregivers do when they shift people up in bed, right? The quick movements, or the movements where you got to hold your arm up for a long period of time. With my 20-minute program, you got 10 minutes to focus on those little things that are special to you, that you need to feel your best. So I'm all about the basics. If you're feeling like this stuff is complicated and you need a little bit of a guide, you know where to find me. Send me a friend request or message me and let me know you need a little bit of guidance, and I'll make sure you get what you need to just take care of yourself with movement. Yeah. My videos have the 7 basic everyday movements: pushing, pulling, loading on our hands, turning, getting down to the floor with lunges, squats, and then walking. And I take those movements and I show you how we do those with adventures. So we go on the water, we go on the beach, we go hiking in the bush, we climb rocks. It's all kind of tropical themed because, as you can tell, I like beaches. But that's what I do. Just keep the basics interesting. I hope this was something that gives you confidence that there's a few small things that you can do to really help yourself succeed, despite the fact that we didn't win the muscle chain lottery. I hope that if you have some questions, you let me know. And thank you for watching.